We're thrilled to have with us today Paolo Mantero, Group Chief Strategy Officer at Zurich Insurance. With his extensive experience in insurance, private equity, strategy and consulting, Paolo now drives Zurich's long-term strategy and execution. Today, Paolo will explore the growing insurance protection gaps with focus on natural disasters and how innovation can help address these gaps. Let's hear more about the key role for insurance and various innovative solutions and promising initiatives to bridge the protection gap. Please welcome Paolo Mantero.
Good morning, everyone. Let me wind the clock back to January 12, 2010. On that day, Haiti was shaken by the biggest earthquake of its history. More than 200,000 people died, and millions were left alone in the streets. Now, on that day, by chance, I had one of my first meetings with an insurance company. And I thought that would be a natural conversation starter. Well, it was for sure a human tragedy. But from an insurance standpoint, it was a non-event. Because out of the 8 billion losses that occurred that day, just 1% of them were insured. So I thought insurance had failed. It failed to accomplish its mission to protect people and companies. And since then, and since I then joined insurance a few years later, I learned a few things about what we call protection gap. And I worked on some of the solutions to close it. So today, I would like to share with you some of these ideas, together with my perspective of how the industry has an unprecedented opportunity to leverage technology to close it. Now, if you think that this is something only for emerging markets, well, you're wrong, because the protection gap is larger in the largest economies, and the US is leading the pack. Nor is something that is touching just few countries. Everybody, because of water, wildfires, you name it, is touched. Nobody is exempted. And I'm talking just about something that is very easy for us to see. I mean, the latest news 3 weeks ago, Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, the largest flood in 80 years in the country. But there are larger gaps. There are bigger gaps, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So, natural catastrophes, but also healthcare, cyber, pensions. And let's start with healthcare. Most of medical expenses today are still paid out of pocket, and the budgets of public is shrinking. So, if something happens to people's health, they're basically left alone. And all the medical advantages that the technology brought us are just something for an elite of individuals. And then pensions. The old age dependency ratio in Europe will go from 33 to 50% over the course of the next 2 decades, which means that for every individual which is a retiree over 65, there will be just 2 people supporting them in working age. You can imagine that this means that millions of elderly people will be below the threshold of poverty. And last but not least, cyber. Cyber warfare and cyber attack have caused $7 trillion damages to the economy in 2022. That's 7% of the global GDP. And this figure is meant to grow to 10 trillion by 2025. Most of the companies affected by cyber are small and medium enterprises, and yet only 20% of them are insured. So altogether, all these gaps sum up to an astonishing figure of $3 trillion. But which, just as a reference, is the size of a G7 economy, like France or UK. But the most astonishing thing is that this gap is not shrinking. It's actually growing, and is growing faster than the economy itself. Now, why should we care about it? Well, a bigger gap also means a more fragile economy. Companies will take longer to recover. They will have to divert financial resources from innovation, from growth, into making up for the emergency. And as you all know, as we all learned during COVID, there will be a knock-on effect through supply chain, not just from in the places that are hit directly by these events, but also throughout the world. Financial markets will be more volatile, financial crises more likely, and people will also suffer. You can imagine all the social implications of it. So it's not only the insurance industry which has failed to close the gap, it's the whole society that did fail. Now, if we're aiming at closing the gap, we should start understanding why the gap is there in the first place. And I will go through some of the reasons from both the demand and the supply side. So let's start from demand. There are three main reasons why the gap is there from a customer perspective: awareness, affordability, and appeal. Now, awareness. Take cyber, for instance, and take UK, which is one of the first adopters when it comes to information technology. 80% of the companies in UK have been successfully hit by cyber attack over the last year. And 2/3 of this company couldn't even recognize it or act fast enough. 50% of the people in UK cannot recognize a phishing email from a genuine one. Now, you can understand that lack of awareness drives lack of preventive actions, which means that the gap will widen. Now, the lack of preventive actions also bring up the cost of insurance, and there are other factors bringing up the cost of insurance. In third world countries, transaction cost is still too high. So for some people, insurance is not even affordable. Now, last but not least, appeal. If you lived your entire life in a home and you feel secure, you have a hard time to believe that you are at risk, even if you are. And together with the fact that risk is fast evolving and insurance companies are having a hard time to cope with it, and so they put restrictions, shrink capacity, the end result is that products, insurance products, sometimes lack of appeal for customers. Now, there are reasons also for the supply side, from the insurance perspective. And I'll name three of them today: limited understanding of risk, missing stakeholder, and moral hazard. The availability of data and models cannot cope with the fast-changing risks. Take climate change, for instance. But in this case, in the case of climate change, at least we know what pattern the risk is taking. And we are actually able to predict, for instance, how flood risk is going to develop at a very granular level in 10, 20 years all around the globe. But there are other risks that are much tougher, much intrinsically tougher to measure and forecast. Take cyber. Now, God knows what a cyber attacker will do in 5 years' time, leveraging AI and quantum computing. So those risks are intrinsically more difficult to insure. And for this risk like this, of course, insurance cannot be the only answer. You need other actors on the stage. You need governments. You need financial markets to help, which comes to the second point. Oftentimes, we are missing these stakeholders at the table. And if you take the 3 trillion that I mentioned before, that's comparable to the size of the insurance market. So you can understand that insurance alone cannot cope with it. There are solutions to bring these actors to the table. They're growing, but they're not enough. And last but not least, moral hazard. I mean, when insurance becomes an alternative to invest on prevention, then insurance is actually contributing net negative to the protection gap. The protection gap widens, And it's a lose-lose situation in which insurance are losing money and the society is not better off. Unless insurance comes with prevention, and in this case, it's a different story. And I will show you some example of that later on. Now, all these factors are not isolated. They play together, they reinforce each other in a negative spiral. It is what is happening today, for instance, in California. Over the last 5 years in California, the risk of wildfire doubled. Now, the awareness of the speed of this change is not there. So governments have not allowed for price increases, which means that 90% of the companies, of the insurance companies, have left the market or have put severe restrictions to how they offer coverage. Result, 50% of the householders in California are not insured. Now, the government is taking steps there, and things are changing. But of course, raising prices is not the solution to the global protection gap in isolation. So, what are the solutions? Well, there are 3 macro areas that I would like to touch upon: prevention, understanding of risk, and new solutions. Now, prevention starts with creating awareness for customers and for society about the nature of the risk and the impact of that. At Zurich, we have established a company called Zurich Resilience Solution, which is helping commercial customers to understand the climate change-related risks and the cyber risks and act on them promptly. We also have established LiveWell, which is a digital company helping customers improving their health habits and so become healthier individuals and living longer. The same competencies that are needed to prevent risk are also the same that you need to understand risk from an underwriting perspective, from a core insurance perspective. And today, with much more computational power, with AI, with much more data, we're much more granular in understanding better and worse risks, and so that we can offer lower prices for good customers, but also identify the one in need for more prevention. Now, better risk understanding also drives innovative solutions. And I'll give you some example of that. Parametric insurance. That's a very easy way to get access to insurance for a customer. But it requires modeling. It requires a lot of data. And so at Zurich, we partner with a company, for instance, called XFarm. Through the IoT technology, we are able to insure farmers against very specific crop diseases. And this is just one example of the application that parametric insurance can have. Now, new insurance solutions can also fuel collaborations between insurance company, states, and financial markets. Public-private partnerships are getting more widespread, but they're very limited to a few examples. In Switzerland, we have the Elementar Schadenpool, which is putting together states, government, and insurers to actually offer protection against systemic risks, like pandemic, for instance. But how many states do they have these programs in place? Not many. And it's not just states, it's also financial markets. Insurance-linked securities have tripled new issuance over the last 5 years. This is a way financial markets participate to the insurance play. And lately, the Singapore government has taken a leading role in expanding these opportunities in Southeast Asia, which is a bit of a testament of how important, from a social standpoint, it is to have all these actors sitting at the table together. Another important social role is played by microinsurance. And what is different today is that the transaction cost can be lowered to a point that insurance become accessible for many individuals around the world. It's what we do at Zurich together with our partner, Blue Marble, and offering insurance to third world countries. Now, insurers need to lead this change. It's our job. It's been the job of Zurich since 151 years. We have gone through 2 industrial revolutions. We faced very difficult, very new risks. You can imagine what it meant to insure factory workers where the working conditions were poor, and when there were no statistics about that in the first industrial revolution. Somebody did it, right? So new risk is not new to insurance. It's our job. Now, what is different today is that the speed of change is much faster. Now, on the other hand, technology development is also faster, which is an help. And we also live in a world of specialization. So we, as an insurance company, we can be the specialist of risk. But we need to partner with other specialists in very other sectors to actually find and collaborate. And so many of you in this room today are part of the solution. At Zurich, we have established a systematic way to go about it. And since 5 years, we have been doing the Zurich Innovation Championship, which only this year involved more than 3,300 startups from all around the world. Through that program, we have established more than 50 ongoing collaborations with innovators, and we will carry it on. It's through collaborations like this that Zurich has worked to close the protection gap. And I will show you some example of that. In cyber, we offer customers and individuals and SMEs a way to protect themselves through box insurance. And we offer larger customers in the commercial space an opportunity to defend themselves from cyber risks to a company we acquired last year in the US called SpareTips. In health, we have several collaborations. With AccuHealth, we offer customer a digital assessment of their health, and so that they can build prevention and recovery plans. And with nanogenetics, we're helping customers understanding their genetic profile so that they can act in advance on a genetic predisposition like breast cancer with preventive plans, and so that they can improve their quality of living and they will live longer. And of course, we cannot be but active also in the natural catastrophe space. With AlphaGeo and Climata, we're able to identify how the perils related to climate change will evolve in 10, 20, 50 years horizon at a very granular level so that we can help customers quantify the economic impact of it and act very early on it. And finally, I don't know if you recognize this picture, maybe familiar. We are in Amsterdam, and in Holland, 8 million people live in areas which are subsiding. Now, with the help of Core AI, with satellite images, we can understand millimeter-scale movements in the land so that we can prevent phenomena like this or like landslides. But the future is even more promising. So I'll give you an example related to weather. So today, we are able to forecast the approaching hurricanes 3 days in advance with the same precision it was possible just 1 day in advance 30 years ago. Think about how many things can be done in 2 days, saving individuals, putting homes and factory in a safer place when an hurricane is approaching. Now, AI is bringing this to the next level. In just a matter of a few months, GraphCast, based on Google DeepMind, has been able to forecast 10 days weather with a better precision than all the traditional models have done so far. It's just a few months. So you can imagine what the future will look like. So Bringing my session to a close, the protection gap is widespread, is global, is growing, and us, as an insurance company, have to play a leading role, but we need innovators. We need change makers. We need people like you in the room to help with technology and with data, solving one of the global issues of today. So let's break the spiral. Let's build a brighter future together. Thank you.